Hey everyone! Welcome back to EchoVerse Whispers. What you're about to hear is not just another horror script, it's the beginning of something deeper. I started this campaign to explore the kind of horror that crawls under your skin and stays there long after the lights go out. Every night at 2:17, it whispers, "My name is more than just a title, it's a question. A curse. A slow unraveling." This is the kind of story that doesn't end when you stop watching. If it hooks you, if it haunts you, let me know in the comments. Should we keep going with this style? Should this become a full series? Now, take a breath, and whatever you do, don't look at the clock when it hits 2:17. Every night at 2:17 it whispers my name. And I used to think it was a dream. One of those half-asleep hallucinations where your brain stitches together fragments of memory and fear and delivers them in hushed tones just before dawn. But it kept happening, always at exactly 2:17 a.m., no matter where I slept at home, at a hotel on a business trip, once even in my car during a road trip when I dozed off at a rest stop. And always the same whisper, just my name, drawn out like someone exhaling it through clenched teeth. Not angry, not urgent, just insistent. And it always woke me up with a start, heart racing, skin prickling like static had crawled over me in my sleep. And I would sit up, look around, try to convince myself it was nothing, but the feeling would linger. Like the sound wasn't just in my ears but still hovering in the room. And the air would feel wrong, thicker, colder, watching. And at first I thought maybe I was just stressed, overworked, not sleeping well, until I mentioned it offhandedly to my younger sister during a phone call. And she got quiet, real quiet. And then she said, "Wait. 2:17. Like, exactly 2:17. And when I said yes, she whispered, "It's been whispering to me too." And my blood ran cold because she hadn't spoken to me in weeks. Had no reason to know that time. No reason to say that unless she had experienced it too. And when I asked what it said, she just replied, "Your name." And I asked if it was in a dream and she said no, she was awake, lying in bed scrolling through her phone when it happened. And I remember how my scalp tingled and I suddenly felt like someone had dropped a bucket of ice water down my back because how could it say my name to her? And how could it say her name to me, unless it knew both of us, unless it was moving? Following, connected somehow through something we couldn't see. And that night I set up my phone to record audio, just to see if it would catch anything. And I woke again at 2:17. This time, sure I'd heard it right in my ear, so close I could feel the breath of it, and I lunged for my phone with trembling hands. Played the recording back, skipping ahead, waiting, hoping it was just silence. But at 2 hours, 17 minutes and 4 seconds a.m., there it was, low and raspy, like someone crouched over the microphone, and it said my name, slow and stretched out like it loved the taste of it. And I dropped the phone, staggered back. Almost convinced myself to smash the thing until curiosity clawed its way back through the terror and I picked it up again. Rewound, played it back 10, 20 times, every time the same whisper, same cadence. And I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and when I tried to play it for my sister the next day, the sound was gone, as if it had erased itself, just a corrupted file with a long stretch of static and silence. But I know what I heard, and the worst part was that now, during the day, I kept thinking I could hear something faint just behind the hum of electronics or the rush of water in the pipes. Like a presence lingering just outside the range of thought, waiting for the next 2:17, waiting to be heard again. And I realized This wasn't something I could outrun or ignore, because whatever it was, it had started learning my name. And it wanted me to hear it. Every night at 2:17, it whispers my name. And after that recording disappeared like it had never existed, I knew this thing wasn't just a voice in the dark, or a hallucination born from stress and sleeplessness. It was something intelligent, something that didn't want to be caught or proven, and that scared me more than the whisper itself, because it meant it was aware. It knew I was trying to expose it, and it didn't want that. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that each time it came, the whisper got a little closer. Like the first few nights, it had been distant, across the room, or near the door. But now, it was by my ear. And it didn't just say my name anymore. Sometimes I could swear there was a second syllable that followed. Something unintelligible, almost like a command or an invitation, but garbled, like it was speaking through water or static. And then there were the shadows, ones that didn't move like normal shadows. Ones that stretched the wrong way when the light hit them, or shifted slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them. And they started appearing, not just at night, but in the corners of my vision during the day, fleeting but unmistakable. And every time I blinked, I expected them to vanish. But sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they held their shape just long enough for me to turn my head and catch a glimpse, something thin, tall, angular, and always watching, never moving, like it was feeding on the act of being seen. And I tried everything I could think of to protect myself. Salt across doorways, mirrors turned to face walls, sleeping with the lights on, with headphones blasting white noise, but nothing worked. The whisper still came, and worse. I started to feel like I was slipping out of sync with time itself. Like the second hand on every clock moved just a little too slow at night, dragging me toward that moment, and I would stare at the clock in the dark, watching the glowing red digits crawl toward 2:17 with the kind of dread I'd never felt in my life. Not during car accidents, not during funerals, not even during the worst panic attacks of my youth, because this wasn't anxiety, it was certainty. The knowledge that something was coming, that it was always coming, and no matter what I did, I would hear my name again and again. And then my sister stopped answering her phone. And I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed, that this was getting to her too and she needed space. But then I got a voicemail from her number, and when I played it back, it was just 10 seconds of breathing, long, shallow, raspy breaths, like someone standing just outside the range of the mic, not saying a word, just listening, and then a whisper, not mine, hers, like she was being made to repeat what I'd heard. And she said, "It says you're next," and then the message cut off, and I called the police, told them I hadn't heard from her, gave them her address. And they found her apartment empty. No signs of forced entry. No signs of violence. But her bed was neatly made, her clothes folded on the chair, her phone still on the nightstand, unlocked. And on the screen was a single open file, a voice recording app still running with the timer frozen, at 2:17 a.m. And there was no sound on the file at all. Not even ambient noise. Just complete, unnatural silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. And when I listened to it later, alone in my room, the silence wasn't empty, it was full, like it pressed in around me, and in that silence I thought I could feel breath on the back of my neck again. Closer than ever, and I didn't dare turn around because something told me if I did, it would be waiting. Every night, at 2:17, it whispers my name. And now I no longer sleep at all, not because I'm trying to avoid it, but because I can't. Not when every time I close my eyes, I see my sister's face frozen in the last photo we ever took together, smiling at the camera with the edge of something dark reflected in her pupils. Something I never noticed until after she disappeared. Something I'm sure was watching us even then. Even in daylight, and I've played the voicemail she left me 100 times. Not because I want to hear it again, but because I'm trying to decode something, some meaning in the way she said it. Says you're next. Like she wasn't just warning me, but passing something on. Like the words themselves were a baton in a cursed relay, and now I feel it all the time, not just at night. Like the world has shifted a few degrees off its axis, and I'm the only one who can tell. Like there's a pressure building in the air around me that no one else seems to feel, and the clocks the clocks, they've started glitching, jumping. From 2:14 to 2:17, instantly. As if time itself won't let me prepare. And when it hits 2:17 now, I don't just hear the whisper, I feel it inside me, like it crawls into my ears and slides down my spine, curling around the base of my skull and murmuring secrets I don't understand. Fragments of syllables in a voice that's begun to sound like mine, distorted and stretched, as though something is learning to imitate me, to become me. And the more I resist, the more it slips into my thoughts during the day, especially when I'm alone, like I'll be brushing my teeth, or walking down the hallway and suddenly hear a soft echo of my name. But when I turn around, nothing's there except that growing sense that something was. And last night I found a note on my kitchen table in handwriting that looked almost like mine but just slightly off. Like someone trying to mimic me without understanding how I loop my letters, and it said, "Why won't you answer?" And I know I didn't write it, I know I didn't. And I tore it up and burned the pieces, but the smell of the smoke was wrong. Sour and chemical, like melted plastic and rotten meat. And the worst part is that I didn't even remember falling asleep that night. But I woke up on the couch, with the clock reading 2:19, and my mouth full of ash. My hands covered in faint scratches, like I'd been digging into something hard and rough. And I checked my phone for any calls or messages, and saw none, except in my call history. There was one outgoing call at 2:17 a.m. But the number was blank. Just a string of slashes and question marks. And it lasted exactly 0 minutes. And I don't know what I said or who or what I was. Nothing, just the hallway, freshly vacuumed. Music playing softly through hidden speakers. The wallpaper flawless and cheerful like a high-end spa. I ran down the hall toward the lobby and found it glowing with warm morning light. The concierge, now replaced by a friendly-looking woman with a wide-brimmed hat and a bright pink blouse, who smiled at me and said, "Checking out today, hun?" As if nothing had ever happened, as if this had been a perfectly average stay. I nodded, barely able to form words, and as she clicked at the ancient keyboard on the counter, she asked, "Did you enjoy your stay in room 615? The number hit me like a truck, and I corrected her, my voice cracking. No, it was 616, but she shook her head gently and pointed to the guest registry. Already filled out in looping cursive that wasn't mine. Listing my room as 615. The signature identical to mine but subtly wrong. Like a copy made by someone who had only seen it once, and I looked around, trying to find any sign that the nightmare I'd endured had ever existed. But everything now radiated mundanity, reality, the front doors wide open to daylight, and the sound of birds, my car parked exactly where I'd left it. Desperate for something, Anything? I asked. Has anyone else checked into 616 recently? And she blinked, then chuckled lightly as if I'd made a joke, and said, 616. There's no such room here, sir. We skip from 615 straight to 617, always. And I must have stared at her too long because her smile faltered and she added, Are you sure you're feeling okay? And I realized then how it must look. Ragged, disoriented, dirty. Like someone who'd gone mad overnight in a normal hotel. But I didn't answer, I just took the receipt she handed me, which bore no room number at all, and staggered out to my car with hands trembling so badly, I could barely turn the key in the ignition. As I pulled onto the road, glancing back through the rearview mirror, I saw the hotel already receding, disappearing behind trees. Its roofline bending oddly as if it were folding in on itself, and I thought for a moment I saw my own face watching me from a second-floor window, staring blankly as if trapped behind the glass, but when I looked again, it was gone. I drove for hours, maybe days, not stopping, not answering calls, not trusting what was real anymore. And eventually found myself hundreds of miles away at a roadside diner, where I used a payphone to call my best friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and tried to explain what had happened, but I couldn't find the words. Only fragments, and when he finally responded, all he said was, That's insane. Hey, did you see this link someone posted in your name? It's called Room 616 footage. Dude, it's blowing up, and my blood turned to ice. I asked him to send it, and when I opened the video on the diner's public terminal, my heart stopped. There I was, sitting in the room, talking directly into the camera, narrating calmly, methodically, even smiling, describing things I didn't remember saying, things I never would have said. And near the end of the video, just before it cut to black, I looked straight into the lens and whispered, They're coming for whoever watches this. Welcome to the next shift. And then the screen glitched and looped over and over, my face warping with each repetition, and behind my reflection, behind every flicker, room 616 waited, hungry, open, eternal. Room 616 was never meant to be opened. I drove until I ran out of gas, until the highway became a blur of repeating signs, and the sky turned the color of damp concrete. And even then, I couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror, not at the road, but at myself, because something was wrong with my reflection. Something I couldn't quite place, but grew worse with every passing mile. Like my eyes were getting darker, deeper, hollowing out from the inside while my face stayed calm, still, like it was wearing me instead of being me. And the gas station where I finally stopped didn't appear on any GPS, had no brand, no attendants. Just a single pump and a small building with flickering fluorescent lights and shelves of expired snacks, but I had no choice, I had to stop. Low and far away, like it was being broadcast through a tunnel, made my skin crawl. I opened the envelope, hands trembling, and inside was a single photo printed on thick, aged paper, a blurry black and white image of the hotel, decades old, with a figure standing in the top right window, one hand pressed against the glass, and when I turned it over there were numbers scrawled on the back, 616, 616, 616, over and over, until the ink had bled through, and beneath it, one final line, if you see your reflection blink, it's already too late. I looked up to ask what it meant, but the man was gone, the chair empty. No sound but the hum of the lights, and when I turned back toward the door, I caught sight of myself in the freezer glass beside the counter, and my reflection was smiling. even though I wasn't. It tilted its head just slightly, and my blood froze. Because I remembered what the mirror me had done before stepping into the closet, before handing over the burden. And I realized I'd never escaped at all, only bought time, only postponed the loop's closing arc, and now the room was inside me. Or maybe I was inside it. I fled the station and drove again, further west, into places the road forgot, stopping at empty motels and refusing to look in any mirrors, covering them with towels, tearing out the ones I couldn't hide, because every time I caught even a glimpse of myself, I saw it, that flicker, that impossible second of lag between my movement and the image. That grin starting just before I smiled, and the fear that if I looked too long, it might not blink when I did. I tried deleting the video, reporting it, taking down the channel. But every time I wiped it, it returned, sometimes under new accounts. Sometimes as bootlegs, reaction videos, even a creepypasta forum where people were trying to summon the room. On purpose, daring each other to book sketchy hotels and ask for 616. And I knew then that it was spreading, feeding through screens and belief and obsession, and the more people watched, the more the room grew, the hungrier it became. One night, months later, I received an email with no subject, no sender, just a JPG file attached, and against every instinct I opened it, finding a blurry screenshot of me, present-day me, sleeping in a hotel bed I didn't recognize, and written in red across the bottom, "Check-in confirmed. Welcome back." I panicked, ran to the mirror, and saw nothing, not even a warped version of myself, just black. Like the glass had become a hole, or a window into somewhere else. And then, faintly, I heard a knock from inside it 5 times, slow and even, and my legs gave out beneath me because I knew, without question, it wasn't a dream, or a memory, or some trauma-induced hallucination. Room 616 wasn't a place you visited. It was a place that marked you, lived in you, grew through the cracks of your soul until you became a hallway for it to move through, and I had been its door, its carrier, its witness. I don't remember what happened after I collapsed, only waking up in another unfamiliar room, identical to the first, same maroon door, same humming walls, same soft knock, and when I looked down at my arm, I saw something new etched into my skin. Not carved, but growing beneath the surface, like a birthmark, slowly unfolding. The spiral symbol from the pool. The mark that meant belonging. And suddenly, I understood what the concierge meant when he said someone else had to take my place. Because I hadn't escaped. I'd only delayed. And now that the loop had brought me back to the beginning, I had one job left before it swallowed me whole. Find the next guest. Room 616 was never meant to be opened. I don't know how I got back to the hotel, or if I ever truly left, because the last thing I remember was standing in front of a roadside mirror, watching my reflection knock from the inside, and now here I was again, standing before the maroon door, with the crooked brass, inside, and now, here I was again. Standing before the maroon door, with the crooked brass numbers, 616, nailed back into place, as though they'd never been removed. And when I looked down at the key in my hand, I noticed the tag was blank, no number. No engraving, just a smooth surface that pulsed faintly with warmth, like a heartbeat. And in that moment, I understood the truth. There was no map, no timeline, no escape, only a spiral that fed on belief, memory, and fear, and every time someone tried to unravel it, they became the next, not in its design. The hallway behind me stretched longer than before, lined with identical doors, each of them slightly ajar. Each leaking whispers that weren't quite words, but suggestions. Echoes of past guests, who had once tried to resist, and now I could feel them watching me, not with malice, but with anticipation, because I had made it further than most. I hadn't died screaming, or vanished without a trace. I'd returned, and the room recognized its own. When I finally stepped inside, it was no longer a hotel room at all, but a hybrid of every version I'd seen: part childhood bedroom, part surveillance chamber, part waterlit temple, the air rich with mildew and electricity, the walls stitched together with memories I hadn't made yet, and seated on the bed, wearing my old hoodie, was someone new. A kid, no older than 16, wide-eyed, knees clutched to his chest, trembling as he looked at me like I was a ghost. And when I asked who he was, he just said, "They sent me a link," and held up a cracked phone showing my face mid-scream, mid-confession, from one of the stolen videos that wouldn't die. He'd watched the whole thing on a dare. Clicked on a second video posted by an anonymous account named "You Checked In," and then woke up here, in the room, alone until now. And it hit me, finally, with paralyzing clarity. The room didn't hunt, it didn't lure, it didn't even need to manipulate people, brought themselves. Always, because curiosity was the door, belief the key, and my story had become the bait. A virus disguised as horror fiction, and now I was here, not as a victim, but as a part of its immune system, meant to test the next host, to pass on the infection through story, through warning, through presence. I told him everything: the pool, the spiral, the mirror, the knock, the reflection that doesn't blink, and with every detail, the lights dimmed, just slightly, the hum behind the walls deepened, and the closet door behind us began to creak open. On its own, inch by inch, as though the room were listening, feeding, growing stronger with each retelling. The boy asked me how to leave, if there was a way out, and I almost lied. I almost told him yes. That if he resisted hard enough, or closed his eyes, or said a magic phrase, it would all go away. But then, I remembered the hundreds of reflections I'd seen on the monitors, the different versions of me, who'd tried different paths, and all ended the same, and instead, I told him the truth. You don't leave, you just delay, and his face twisted with fear and betrayal and the beginnings of understanding. The kind that only arrives when something irreversible begins to take root in the mind. The mirror across from the bed lit up again, flickering, showing him, not me, this time, but him lying on the bed in different postures, in different clothes, aging slowly across each frame. Like the room was testing how many ways it could keep him here, how many timelines it could feed into his future. I reached for the closet door, unsure what would happen, but needing to end the moment, before it swallowed both of us. And as I pulled it open fully, we both stared into the dark. No bottom, no shape, only sound, whispers, gasping breath, the wet drag of something pulling itself upward, toward the threshold, and then from behind us came the knock 5 times. Deliberate, final, and I didn't turn, because I already knew what I would see. The boy screamed, bolting toward the bathroom. And I followed, not to save him, but because the lights in the room had begun to strobe, casting shadows that didn't match our movements, and the door slammed shut behind us with a force that rattled the tiles. We waited in silence, only the soft gurgle of the sink filling the air. Until finally, I dared to speak. "It won't stop unless you do what I did," and before he could ask what that was, the lights went out, and the mirror across the sink came alive with a new scene. The front desk, pristine and glowing. The woman in pink, smiling and holding out a key card with his name on it, welcoming him, already forgetting me. And I knew then that the room had chosen, the spiral was closing. And my time was nearly up. The boy turned to me with horror as his reflection smiled wider and wider. Teeth multiplying, eyes dimming, and whispered, Is that me?" And I nodded slowly, placing my hand on the glass, watching my own reflection dissolve into static, and said, "It is now." Room 616 was never meant to be opened. The bathroom light flickered back on with a sickly green hue, and the mirror went dark. No more reflections. No more ghost images or flickering timelines. Just black glass staring back at it. Comforter was a new envelope, thicker than the last, sealed with wax, that bore the spiral mark I now knew too well. I approached it cautiously, and peeled it open, revealing 2 things, a single Polaroid of me, and the boy standing in front of the mirror, and a hand-scrawled note that read, "Thank you for your stay. Transmission successful. The room is now self-sustaining." And underneath that, written faintly, almost invisible, "You are now free to check out." But I didn't feel free, I felt hollow, unraveling, like a piece of thread being pulled endlessly through a needle that no longer led anywhere. And when I turned to the boy, he was already gripping the mirror with both hands, eyes vacant, mouth twitching like he was hearing something I couldn't, and he said, "I see it now. I see all of it. It's already here." And before I could stop him, he slammed his forehead into the glass, cracking it in a perfect spiral. The center caving inward with a soft sucking sound like air being pulled through a throat, and the moment the mirror shattered, the walls of the room rippled literally. The plaster bending like fabric caught in a storm, and the hum returned. Louder now, deafening, like a turbine fed by memories and loops and faces and failures. And the bed burst into flames without heat, blue fire licking upward as the photo burned itself away, the spiral mark searing itself onto the ceiling above us, and the room began folding in on itself, like a collapsing lung. I grabbed the boy, pulled him from the mirror shards. But he was limp, muttering nonsense, his eyes flicking back and forth rapidly. And somewhere in the corner, near the closet door, I saw figures gathering, not shadows, not reflections, but people, dozens of them, all versions of myself at different ages, some missing eyes, some bound in chains of hair and wire, some standing peacefully with sad smiles like they'd made peace with something I hadn't yet understood, and they all whispered in unison, "You are the echo. Let the new voice rise." And with that, I felt it, not in my ears but in my bones, a release, a snap. Like the string that had kept me tethered to this place had finally broken. And I turned to the hallway where a door now stood wide open to the morning outside, clean, real air, moving like it should, no flicker, no hum, and I knew this was my only chance to escape. Not the room, but the roll, the loop. I looked at the boy one last time. Still kneeling. Still lost. The spiral faintly glowing beneath the skin of his throat now. And whispered, "You'll understand soon." We all do, then walked out, and as I crossed the threshold into the light, I heard the door shut behind me. Not with a slam, but with a soft, final click, like the end of a chapter, written in someone else's hand. The world outside hadn't changed. Cars passed, birds sang. People stared at their phones and crossed streets, but I had. I could feel it in the way shadows leaned toward me. How mirrors still held a 2-second delay before catching up. How every time I saw the number 616, I felt a spike of pressure behind my eyes. And the knowledge that the room wasn't finished with me, it was simply growing beyond me now, living in the stories told, the videos watched, the dares whispered between friends who didn't know what they were invoking. I checked my inbox a week later to find an email from an address that didn't exist anymore. No reply at 616stay.com. And the subject line read simply, "Another guest has checked in. Thank you for your service." With an attached thumbnail of the boy, now sitting in the center of the room, smiling directly into the camera as the closet door behind him creaked open. Room 616 was never meant to be opened. The email vanished the second I clicked it, leaving no trace in my inbox, no cached thumbnail, no download history, not even the browser remembered it. And that terrified me more than the image itself, because it meant the room was evolving, learning how to erase its tracks. And as I stared at the empty screen with my heart pounding in my chest, I felt a sudden pressure at the base of my skull. Like something was pressing inward from the inside. A dull ache that pulsed every few seconds in perfect sync with my heartbeat. And in that moment I knew the room had left a part of itself behind. A fingerprint inside my mind. Maybe even a keyhole. And all it needed now was for someone else to turn it. I tried returning to normal life, if you can call what I had before this normal. But every attempt failed in small, rotting increments. Friends stopped replying to texts. Numbers on my phone disappeared and reappeared in different orders. Street signs misspelled familiar names, and even my own reflection began to disobey more frequently. Blinking out of sync or holding a fixed stare after I'd turned away mocking me. Maybe, or warning me, I couldn't tell anymore. A month later, I received a box at my door, unmarked, sealed with that familiar wax spiral. And I knew immediately that opening it would be a mistake, but of course I did. Because no one escapes curiosity. Not really. And inside was a hotel key. On a silver chain with a tag that read, "For emergencies only," and on the back, "You'll know when." Beneath it was a flash drive and a crumpled napkin from a gas station halfway across the country. The kind I hadn't seen since before all this began, and scrawled across it in blue pen. "He made it to the mirror. He's asking for you by name." And suddenly I saw his face again. The boy, sitting on that bed. Whispering truths the room was feeding him. Becoming its voice, its mouthpiece. And I realized I hadn't escaped, I'd just been drafted into a new tier of responsibility. I plugged in the flash drive in a coffee shop, surrounded by oblivious strangers. And a single video opened without a file name, without a play button. Just a live feed that began automatically, the interior of room 616. Angles I'd never seen before, a perfect 360-degree view, and sitting in the center was not the boy but me. Not how I looked now, but how I looked the night I first arrived. Bag on the floor, sweat on my brow, the moment before the mirror began to flicker. And as I watched, horrified, that version of me turned to look directly at the camera, raised a hand slowly, and said, "He's here again. We need another guest," and the feed glitched, cut, looped back 5 seconds, and played it again, and again, and again, like a broken record buried in haunted circuitry. When I yanked the drive free, the laptop screen cracked down the center with a shriek of static. The lights in the cafe blinked, and a barista spilled boiling coffee on herself but didn't scream. Didn't react at all, just stood there staring at the wall like she'd forgotten how time worked, and I ran no destination, just motion. Just an instinct to get away before the room fully woke up inside me again. And that night I slept in my car at a rest stop, clutching the emergency key, like it might explode. That's when the dreams returned, not the usual kind, but layered dreams. Dreams within dreams where I would wake up only to find I was still in 616. Brushing my teeth, buttoning a shirt I didn't own, hearing the knock from somewhere below. Or worse, the voice of the concierge, whispering directly into my eardrum, "Someone's checked in using your name." And then, during one of those dreams, I found myself in a different version of the hotel, not decaying, not monstrous, but modern, sleek, new construction, and yet still carrying the exact same energy, like an organ transplant where the heart of the building remained the same, no matter how the exterior changed. And on the 6th floor, was room 616, again, untouched, waiting, door cracked, mirror glowing. And inside was a conference table, surrounded by people, all with my face, all wearing different clothes, some in suits, some in pajamas, one soaked in pool water, and shivering, and they turned to me in unison and said, "The guest arrives tomorrow. You'll greet them this time." And I woke up screaming in a Walmart parking lot with my mouth full of rust and the emergency key missing from my neck. I returned home to find it already there, placed neatly on my desk, beside a new envelope that said only, "Welcome, concierge in training. You've been expected." And inside was a printed script, a list of phrases I hadn't said yet, meant for a future guest, including lines like, "No one ever really checks out, and the mirror always tells the truth, on the 3rd blink," and at the bottom, beneath all the notes and timings, was a final instruction: "When the door knocks 5 times, smile. It's showtime." And as I stared down at it, something inside me, whatever was still human, began to cry, because I realized the room hadn't just fed on my fear or harvested my memories. It had turned me into part of its machinery. Room 616 was never meant to be opened. I tried burning the script, tearing it apart, flushing the pieces down the toilet. But no matter what I did, every morning it reappeared in the exact same place, perfectly folded, the ink never smudged. Always smelling faintly of mildew, and that electric ozone stench I'd only ever smelled inside the room, and every time I read it, even by accident, I found new lines written in my own handwriting, things I couldn't remember writing. Things like, "We are the door now, and do not forget to smile when they say." I thought this was just a joke, and worse. Entire paragraphs describing guests I hadn't met yet, including their names, their fears, their reasons for booking the room, and the precise time they'd knock on the mirror. As if the room was bleeding its future into me drop by drop, until I was just another vessel, another tour guide. Because every time I closed my eyes, I'd wake up somewhere in the hotel. Sometimes in the laundry room, where the sheets screamed as they spun. Sometimes in the elevator shaft, where the numbers never stopped cycling between 6 and 1 and 6 again. And sometimes in the pool, where the water rose slowly, always just above my nose. Always whispering secrets in the voice of the boy who had replaced me, and each time I woke in my real bed, drenched in sweat, only to find a new photo taped to my bathroom mirror, always black and white, always grainy, always showing someone else now trapped inside the room, staring at the camera with that same hollow look I once wore. And I knew what the room wanted. It wanted me to return, not as a prisoner this time, but as the host. I resisted for as long as I could, ignoring the voices in the vents, the phone calls with no caller ID, that only played the sound of distant footsteps, followed by 5 knocks. The reflection in my microwave that smirked even when I didn't, but resistance only made it hungrier, more aggressive, until one night I opened my fridge and found it empty except for a steaming hotel meal with a silver lid and a note that said room service on the house, and when I lifted the lid, it was a plate of my own teeth, arranged in a spiral, each one engraved with a guest's name I somehow recognized. I finally broke down and drove back to the hotel's location, or where it used to be, but when I got there, the lot was gone, overgrown with weeds, the building no longer standing, only a collapsed foundation and an old cement pillar where a single key dangled from a hook, and when I picked it up, I realized I hadn't come to find the room. I'd come because it called me home. The key pulsed in my palm like a living thing, and the second I touched it, the world shifted, not violently, not with thunder or fire, but subtly, like someone had changed the channel and no one noticed, and suddenly I was standing in the hallway again, right outside room 616, and this time, the door was already open, just a crack. Just enough to let the cold breath of the room whisper out and stroke my skin like a parent beckoning a child to bed. Inside, everything was waiting, the mirror, now whole again but webbed with gold like cracked porcelain, repaired with care, the bed freshly made, the closet door shut tight, and on the nightstand, the spiral script, my guest list, and a new photo. This time of a young woman I'd never seen before, wearing headphones, sitting at a computer, mid-laugh as if she was watching something funny, and on her screen, blurry but unmistakable, was footage of the room's door slowly creaking open. I didn't know her name, not yet, but I knew she'd be next, and just like that, the floor beneath my feet glowed with the same soft blue light from the pool. And the room began humming, like it was waking from a nap, stretching its limbs, and I realized it wasn't just a place, it was an intelligence, an organism built from repetition, made real by attention and fear and ritual. And every story told about it only fed its shape, made it sharper, more persistent, more true. I stepped toward the mirror and saw not myself, but an empty chair, waiting. And then the camera turned, not digitally, but as if something was moving it, and I understood my role now. Fully, I was the usher, the narrator, the voice in the dark leading the new guest to their seat. And the story would continue through me. Not because I wanted it to, but because the room had already written the ending, and now it needed the next chapter. Behind me, the knock came 5 times, and I turned, slowly, smiling as I'd been trained to do, and whispered, "Welcome. You must be tired. Don't worry, you've already checked in." Room 616 was never meant to be opened. She stepped into the room without hesitation. Like something had pulled her across time and reason to this exact point. And as soon as she crossed the threshold, the door swung shut behind her, not with a slam, but with a sigh, like the room exhaling with satisfaction after holding its breath. for too long, and in that instant the temperature dropped, the lights dimmed to that familiar shade of rotten green, and the spiral on the ceiling blinked once, just once, as if confirming, the cycle begins again. She looked around, confused, but not afraid yet, her eyes scanning the room with that same first,